Let me tell you about the night my sister stole my life. Not in secret, not in some dark backroom deal, but in front of 200 of New York's most beautiful. It was her, Happy New Year 2026, gala in her Trica penthouse. All crystal and chrome and a view that made the city look like her personal jewel box. I was there in a dress she'd bought me, holding champagne I didn't want, trying to smile through a grief that still felt like a physical wound. Our mother had been gone only 4 months. Cassandra took the makeshift stage, a vision in ice blue silk, her smile radiating benevolent concern. She spoke of family, of legacy, of difficult decisions made with love. Then her eyes found mine. A flicker of something cold beneath the warmth. "My dear sister Elara," she said, her voice dripping with pity, "has been struggling so profoundly since our mother's passing. Her stability, it's been a fragile thing. As her only family, it has fallen to me to make the hard choices to protect her, and to protect our mother's wishes." The room hushed. She spun a tale of my erratic grief, of financial mismanagement she'd painfully discovered, of a need for her to assume sole control of the Vance inheritance, millions in stocks, properties, everything, for my own good. I stood frozen as a gallery of faces turned to me, their expressions shifting from curiosity to a detached, wealthy sympathy. I was no longer a person, I was a problem she was gracefully solving. My hand, numb at my side, drifted into the pocket of my dress. My fingers closed around my phone. The screen was dark, but a tiny, red recording icon pulsed silently beneath the fabric. I'd hit it 40 minutes ago, wanting to capture the speeches, the toasts, a piece of the night to remember. Or maybe some part of me, the part that had grown up with Cassandra, had already known to keep a record. She finished to soft, approving applause, her eyes holding mine in a performance of sorrow. She didn't know. She didn't know I recorded everything. And that was the moment I knew. The real revenge begins now. The descent from the penthouse was a silent, spectral journey. The elevator's muted chime sounded like a death knell. Out on the street, the cold January air was a slap, sharp and clean compared to the perfumed toxicity upstairs. New York's energy, the blare of distant horns, the shimmer of neon on wet asphalt. The anonymous rush of the crowd flowed around me, a river around a stone. I was that stone, heavy, cold, and sinking. I walked without direction, the echoes of her words a corrosive loop in my skull. Fragile, protection, sole control. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was my mother's love made manifest. Her lifelong work translated into security for her daughters. An equal split. That's what the will, the one document I'd seen through a haze of tears, had stated in plain, legal prose. But in the fog of grief, Cassandra had been the lighthouse. "Let me handle the paperwork, Elle, it's a nightmare. You just focus on healing." I had signed things, so many things, trusting the big sister who had braided my hair and defended me from schoolyard bullies. Now I saw those signatures for what they were, the careful, deliberate dismantling of my future. My apartment, a rental she'd arranged for me after convincing me to sell my cozy West Village place for liquidity, felt like a showroom. Nothing was mine. The art was generic, the furniture sleek and uncomfortable. It held no memories, only the sterile scent of her control. I poured 2 fingers of cheap bourbon, a rebellion against her curated wine cellar, and finally pulled the phone from my pocket. The audio file was a digital specter, a ghost of the past hour waiting to speak. With a deep, shuddering breath, I plugged in headphones and pressed play. The first sounds were the muffled cacophony of the party, clinking glasses and laughter. Then, the clear, close acoustics of her private study. I must have left my wrap there earlier, the phone forgotten in the pocket, had borne silent witness. 2 voices, low and intimate. Cassandra's, but stripped of its public warmth, was a blade of polished steel. "The Rosen affidavit is the linchpin," she said. "Dr. Rosen, the compassionate therapist I'd seen after Mom died, at Cassandra's insistence. Our sessions, where I'd wept about loss and fear, were now clinical fodder. With her history of anxiety and that inpatient stay, it's a solid foundation for the competency petition." Inpatient stay. A 2-week grief retreat in the Berkshires. She'd called it a chance to breathe. It had been a sanctuary. Now it was a weaponized footnote in a legal document branding me incapable. A man's voice answered, dry and gravelly, James Croft, the family lawyer. It's elegant. The judge will see a concerned sister preventing a vulnerable beneficiary from squandering a legacy. The guardianship will be granted. It's all perfectly legal. A soft clink of crystal. To new beginnings, Cassandra said. To Valor's new senior partner, Croft replied. The capital from the liquidated Vance assets will secure your bid. Your mother would be impressed. There was a pause, then the faint, absent-minded sound of humming. A tuneless snippet of a melody. Moon River. Our mother's song, the one she'd sung while making pancakes on Sunday mornings. Cassandra was humming it as she orchestrated the theft of everything our mother had built for us. The recording ended with the distant swell of the party, as I must have retrieved my wrap. I sat in the dark, the bourbon untouched, the truth settling into my bones not as heat, but as a glacial, clarifying cold. The next morning I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. Elara Vance, 34. Architectural historian, a woman who could read the stories of buildings in the wear of their stone and the slant of their light. Now, I had to learn to read the architecture of deceit. My eyes, always thoughtful, now looked haunted. I applied a mask of calm. The face of the broken sister she expected to see. I went to the therapy appointment she scheduled, nodding as the new, overly sympathetic therapist. Undoubtedly on Cassandra's payroll, talked about accepting help and healthy dependency. I texted Cassandra a meek thank you for the first allowance deposit. A pittance auto-deposited into an account she controlled. Her reply was immediate, brimming with sisterly concern. Of course, sweetie. This is what family is for. Lunch next week. The performance had begun. Our lunch was at a minimalist, overpriced spot in the financial district, all white marble and green juice. She was a masterpiece of crafted empathy, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand, her diamond solitaire cutting into my skin. You look tired, Elle. Are you sleeping? I worry. Her gaze was an MRI scan, searching for cracks in my façade. It's a lot to process, I murmured, pushing kale around my plate. Feeling so powerless. The lie was bitter on my tongue. Her eyes softened with a victory so subtle, only someone who'd known her a lifetime could see it. It's not powerlessness, she corrected gently, as if explaining to a child. It's freedom from burden. I'm carrying the weight so you don't have to. The psychological calibration was exquisite. She was reframing theft as a gift, oppression as care. I left that lunch with a new resolve. My revenge would not be a scream in the dark. It would be a silent, structural demolition. The recording was not for a courtroom, not yet. It was a blueprint. It showed me the load, bearing walls of her scheme Croft's complicity. The falsified medical narrative, the funneling of funds into her partnership, bid at Valor Investments. I became a scholar of my own destruction. My research skills, once used to trace the provenance of Gothic gargoyles, turned to forensic finance. In the hushed glow of the public library, I traced shell companies with names like Acheron Holdings and Styx Ventures. I cross-referenced property deeds, finding our mother's Napa vineyard, now listed under a LLC owned by a Cayman-based entity. I lived a double life: the docile, recovering sister during daylight, and a digital ghost by night, piecing together the labyrinth Cassandra had built. I learned about the waterfront development project, the Airy, that Cassandra was championing at Valor. It was her masterpiece, a brutalist complex of condos and privatized parkland. The financing was precarious, reliant on swift capital influx. My capital, mother's capital, the psychological warfare was a subtle, daily toxin. I'd send Cassandra links to articles about sibling estrangement, or the psychological toll of financial abuse with innocent notes. This made me think of us. Strangely. Hope you're well, X. She'd call her voice a careful neutral. That article was dark L. Are you sure you should be reading such things? I just found it interesting, I'd say, letting my voice waver. It's hard not to see parallels. I could hear the quiet tension on her end. the sound of a puppeteer feeling a string twitch. I needed an ally, a weakness in her armor. Croft was the obvious target. His law firm, Croft and Vetter, had a veneer of old-world probity, but my digging found cracks. A son's failed startup repeatedly bailed out, a wife with a notorious jewelry collection, rumors of high-stakes debt from a private poker club. He was a man living beyond his means, dependent on clients like Cassandra who operated in gray areas. I couldn't approach him directly. Instead, I began to reconstruct my own life, publicly but quietly. I used my meager allowance to take a certified course in financial forensic analysis. I reached out to a former professor, a woman named Diane who was both brilliant and discreet. Over coffee, I spoke in hypotheticals about estate fraud. She listened, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. Hypothetically, she said, the weakest point in such a scheme is often the professional enabler. Their license is their life, and they're usually the first to fold when the facade cracks. She gave me the name of a lawyer, Naomi Reyes. Known for being a bulldog in kitten heels, meeting Naomi in her modest, book-choked office in Brooklyn was a revelation. She was small, fierce, with eyes that missed nothing. I played her a 3-minute edited clip of the recording, the key exchange about Dr. Rosen and the competency affidavit. She listened unmoved, then replayed it. This, she said finally, tapping her pen, is a nuclear option. But if we detonate it publicly, she'll paint you as a manipulative, tech-savvy liar exploiting a private moment. We need to use it surgically. To collapse the foundation. Not just blow up the building. Her strategy was a thing of beauty. We would use the recording not as public evidence, but as a key to unlock a series of legal dominoes. We would file a motion to dissolve the guardianship based on new evidence of bad faith, forcing a confidential hearing. The threat of the recording going wider would be our leverage. Cassandra must have felt the tectonic shift. Her surveillance tightened. She dropped by my apartment unannounced, her eyes cataloging my sparse belongings, the financial textbooks on my table. Studying, she asked, a smile on her lips but not in her eyes. Just trying to understand things better, I said. It's a good distraction. Her next move was escalation. She summoned me to Valor's headquarters. The boardroom was on the 58th floor, a glass cage in the sky. She stood at the head of the table, not offering a seat. Elara, she began, dispensing with preamble. Your recent activities have come to my attention. This financial course. Reconnecting with old contacts. It smacks of paranoia, of the very instability we're trying to manage. She paced, a panther in a Prada suit. I've made a decision. The city is a trigger for you. I've secured a place for you upstate. A beautiful, quiet facility with excellent support. You can focus on your well-being. It was an asylum by another name. A permanent, gilded erasure. This was the precipice. I felt no fear, only a crystalline clarity. I looked out at the panoramic view of the city she wanted to reshape, then back at her. You hummed Moon River, I said, my voice flat and quiet in the vast room. She stopped pacing. What? On the recording. Right after you and Croft discussed how my grief retreat would be used to prove me incompetent. You hummed a few bars of Moon River. Mother's song. The blood drained from her face, leaving her perfectly made, up complexion a stark, shocking white. For the first time in my life, I saw true, unguarded shock in my sister's eyes. It was followed by a ripple of pure, primal fear. You recorded us. The sentence was a breathless violation. The full 47 minutes. I confirmed, taking a step forward. It's in multiple encrypted locations, set to release upon a missed daily check-in or a sudden change in my residential status. It details fraud, conspiracy, and the intended misappropriation of funds for your airy project. I let the silence stretch, watching her mind race behind her terrified eyes. The quiet facility upstate sounds lovely, Cassandra. But I think you should go. What followed was a silent, brutal war waged in law offices and through terse, legal correspondence. With Naomi's guidance, we initiated proceedings. The first skirmish was with James Croft. We invited him, without Cassandra, to a neutral conference room. Naomi played the full recording. Hearing his own voice, so casually conspiratorial, unraveled him. His shoulders slumped. The distinguished lawyer becoming a scared old man in a matter of minutes. He agreed, in writing, to support the petition to dissolve the guardianship, and to provide a sworn statement of his actions, under Cassandra's direction. In exchange for immunity from a bar complaint, his betrayal of her was instant and total. It was the first domino, and it fell with a satisfying, silent crash. Cassandra fought back with the terrifying fury of a cornered predator. She sent emissaries, aunts, old family friends, with messages of conciliation and warnings about tearing the family apart. She offered a settlement, a lump sum, generous by most standards, a pittance by mine. A final, desperate bid to make me go away quietly. I remained silent, letting Naomi's letters do the talking. The final meeting was ordered by the court. It was held in a small, windowless arbitration room, a far cry from her glittering penthouse. The air was thick with tension. Cassandra was there with a new, steely lawyer. Croft was there, avoiding her gaze. A court-appointed guardian ad litem and a forensic auditor completed the grim tableau. Naomi submitted the audio file as evidence. The arbitrator, a wary-looking woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, listened to the key segments. The room was utterly still. Hearing it in that sterile, official setting was surreal. The casual cruelty of their planning, the cold calculation. The hummed melody it hung in the air, more damning than any shouted accusation. When it finished, the arbitrator looked at Cassandra. Ms. Vance. Do you dispute the authenticity of this recording? Cassandra's lawyer began to speak, but she silenced him with a raised hand. She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw the sister I'd known vanish, replaced by a cold, defeated strategist who knew the board was lost. No, she said, her voice hollow. I do not dispute it. The settlement was total. The guardianship was annulled, effective immediately. All assets were to be frozen and subjected to a full forensic audit at Cassandra's expense. My share, with calculated interest, was to be returned in full. My name was to be cleansed from all associated legal filings. Furthermore, she was to publicly divest from the Airy project, removing the Vance name and the tainted capital from its financing. In exchange, I agreed to the non-disclosure of the recording, and to forego civil or criminal charges, provided every condition was met to the letter. It wasn't about putting her in jail, it was about dismantling the edifice she'd built on my ruin. Weeks later, on a cool, clear spring evening, I stood in my reclaimed West Village apartment. The boxes were unpacked. My books were on the shelves, my worn rug on the floor. The space smelled of my coffee. My lemon-scented cleaner, my life. A notification glowed on my laptop, the first 7-figure transfer, from an escrow account back into my own, independent name. The silence was not the silence of the grave or the showroom, but the deep, resonant silence of a space that is truly your own. I walked to the window. Looking down at the quiet street, a news ticker on the corner bodega scrolled a headline in ready. VLERE, PROJT Stelas Amide Financiage VW. Cassandra Vance stepped a W in. I felt no joy, no triumphant blaze. Only a profound, wary solidity. The revenge was complete. It had not been sweet. It had been a necessary, bitter medicine, a surgical removal of a parasitic growth. She had tried to erase me, to turn me into a cautionary footnote in her own glorious story. But I had been the silent audience, the archivist of my own betrayal. And in the end, my evidence, the unvarnished, recorded truth of her, had spoken the only language her world of mirrors, and Spin truly understood, the language of irreversible consequence. The new year had finally begun.